Hey everyone, it's Kelly with Women for One, and I am just so honored and excited to be speaking with Jeff Brown today. Just to tell you a little bit about Jeff, he's a former criminal lawyer and psychotherapist, and he's the author of several books. The book I just read, Soulshaping, A Journey of Self-Creation, is quite amazing because it's so grounded in its principles, and the way he lays it out is so understandable and beautiful for anyone that picks up the book. And then he just released Ascending with Both Feet on the Ground, and he's been endorsed by other people that we've spoken to, such as Elizabeth Lesser, who I have great respect with, Oriah Mountain Dreamer, and Catherine Woodward Thomas, who I have great respect for as well. Ascending actually is a collection of Jeff's most popular spiritual graffiti quotes, soul bites, and he frequently shares these on social media, and that's actually where I encountered Jeff. Everything I read when he posts is so resonates with where the movement of Women for One has evolved into, and I just am really excited to be speaking with you today, Jeff, so welcome.
Thanks, Kelly.
Yeah. Very excited. So I wanted to start with a quote of yours that I read in your book, because you seem to have a lot of these beautiful quotes that just come out of you and they resonate with me. So I kind of wanted to start there because it was about authenticity. And it says, in a culture that prioritizes the ego above all else, we elevate adaptation at the expense of authenticity. And I love that quote. It was in your book, Soulshaping, as I loved many other things you spoke about. So I just wanted to start with that and ask you, what your true definition of authenticity is, because we do ask a lot of people that.
Yeah. I think for me, I would call it sacred purpose, being true to path. I come from the belief, that the world is shifting from survivalism as an orienting principle in the direction of something called authenticity. Mm-hmm. Your question is the right question. What do we mean by that? And for me, if I really go into my bones and ask the question, what's the real Jeff? Who's the real Jeff? Where do I find him? I find him in these things called soul scriptures, this idea that every individual comes into incarnation with a particular set of callings, archetypal transformations, and primary emotional issues to work through that live at the heart of their expansion in this lifetime, and that's what growth is, and that spiritual maturation is not about leaving the physical field, it's not about leaving the identifications, it's not about moving farther away from the self, but that in fact real authenticity, a real spiritually authentic life, is one that's really nestled in the heart of the self, and what the self is here to accomplish and to work its way through. And so to the extent that I can find those callings, pathways, and key emotional learnings and work my way through them, I feel like I'm living an authentic life. And to the extent that I'm off path, that is disconnected or alienated from those scriptures, I feel like I'm living falsely.
Okay. It's interesting. You talked about maturation of personality, and I was on a journey in my early 20s where I went and lived with a guru in India, and had these so-called spiritual awakenings, and left that life for a more pragmatic family life, and then decided, that song by Talking Heads, "This Isn't My Life," that song. This was woke up one day and where am I? What am I? Who am I? In my early 30s, and decided to really take a look at all of the wounds I had and the things that had happened to me in my life and my personality to mature it so that I could be more grounded in creating that new vision for my life. And it seems as if that in soul shaping, that's what you're doing. You're talking about your journey to that place as well.
Absolutely. For me, I define spirituality simply as reality. So
right.
The most spiritual experience I have is the one that encompasses the most levels, degrees, and threads of reality. What people have traditionally called spiritual is a single-threaded experience, which often is about bypassing the self and the personal identifications, the emotional body, the physical body. It's a quest for unity that's completely devoid of separate selfness or non-duality that removes everything uncomfortable from the field, like witnessing the pain body rather than including the pain body, like detachment as a life rather than detachment as a tool. And so my spirituality is detachment is simply a tool. And and it's not a life, and really the ultimate path is one that weaves it all together, what I call Western consciousness, so the quest for unity, intrinsic to the East, the quest for healthy self-concept and a healthy ego and a sense of self, intrinsic to Western psychology and inspiration work, for example. And if you weave those together and find that perfect balance between those two awarenesses, to me, you're living a pretty balanced reality.
So it's interesting because you're talking about like light and dark and incorporating them. You're talking about Western and Eastern philosophies, the feminine, the masculine. I see a lot of the balancing out of the dualities is what you're talking about more. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, sure. Holding it all together in your consciousness, what I call enrealment, just showing up for all of it.
Okay, and showing up for all of it, and that is spirituality to you, and authenticity.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. To call yourself, I mean, what we often call a spiritual teacher is someone who's perfected one particular thread of consciousness, like
right.
They're great witnessers or great meditators, or they really can help you in their vibration to understand that there's a unified field, but they really haven't worked through their issues, they're misbehaving with the feminine, everything's all over the place. So there's underdeveloped aspects and overdeveloped aspects. To me, real spirituality means we work to develop all aspects, and then we find the weave that holds them all together.
Ooh, I like that. That's a really interesting way of looking at it, that perception. Because that's just, it kind of opens something up in my brain, because I've never been able to say it that way. I've never really subscribed to any specific, like I got into quantum physics for a while, and I got into Eastern philosophy for a while, and then I looked at Zen. I dabbled around, but not from a place of trying to find my path, quote, but really to really incorporate what my belief system is in my reality. And the way you say it is, you're saying that's all it is. It's just creating that reality that is your spiritual, developing all these different places inside yourself and challenging yourself on the different threads.
Well, absolutely, but also being able to be available. So in other words, you're capable of having a relationship. You're capable of being in the world and holding to your center. You don't have to flee the world and be in the meditation cave and call that spirituality. Yesterday I spent a couple of hours with a insane 3-year-old and my little buddy Lowen, and this guy is absolutely out of control, looking to fight, looking to be the boss, like he's a little alpha male 3-year-old. And, all the time sitting there going, God, is this spirituality? And of course it is. I mean, why can't I stay in my center in the heart of it? Why do I have to flee the crazy 3-year-old in order to come back to something called my spiritual center? I mean, it really is just being able to be in all of it. So you really are doing the laundry.
Yes.
The cornfield says, and you're aware of the fact that you're still part of a unified field. You're holding all threads at one time.
You're aware of it. Yes. Yeah. I mean, I feel that way as a mom and a wife. I have 3 children, 3 stepchildren, and a lot of times I'm like, whoa. This is my growth. This is my spirituality in a lot of ways when I'm losing my center with them. I get it. That's a really good point. Okay, so you basically have been talking about your philosophy around soul shaping. Do you have anything else you want to talk about? I love the I don't know what you call them, but they seem like archetypes you spoke about in the book. And I'm just wondering where they kind of evolved out of.
Well, I mean, I think my journey, everything evolved out of my journey. I'm not so much a reader, I'm more of an experiencer. And it was clear to me that through so many different hints and whispers in my early life, that my movement in this life was from a more malevolent warrior consciousness to a more benevolent warrior or healer consciousness. So you have to identify the archetypes. And Carolyn Meese's work is very helpful with sacred contracts to list them. You don't want to be confined to those. You want to be real clear and unique as to what your experience is, but at the same time it's good to get thinking about it. And for me, that was an important part, initially a very important part of my journey and fundamental to my transition in this lifetime from one consciousness to another. But really at the heart of sacred purpose for me, apart from callings, like the calling to write or your calling to do this work and archetypal transformation, really is the emotional body work. It's my unique addition to the idea of sacred or divine purpose, which is really the belief that our most challenging emotional issues, my abandonment, or whatever your triggers are, or whatever your thing is, that to the extent that you can really work those through, instead of seeing them as something separate from spirituality, an accident and a mistake, to actually embrace them as fundamental to your spiritual maturation, what I call sell your soul, CEO your soul, the idea that repressed emotions or unactualized spiritual lessons. So again, just like in the consciousness of enrealment, we bring everything into the equation of our spirituality, including those tough pieces that keep resurfacing and seemingly blocking our path. What we've got to understand is they're not blocking our path, they're our path. And to the extent that we can work those issues through, we expand and mature in our spirituality. And to the extent that we keep bypassing, sidestepping, and calling them in-body, worth witnessing, not jumping into, we actually postpone our expansion spiritually.
So how do you jump into them? How do you
do the work? You just do the work. I mean, you get a therapist if you can
right.
get a therapist. You do breath work. I mean, whatever your path is, like bioenergetics. I did amazing work with Stan Groff's holotropic breath work. On the mat, I released more old stuff than I ever could do in a talk therapist's room, that's for sure. And that's where the real transformation happened for me in the body. But, still therapeutic modalities and therapeutic support with the right structures and the right individuals is hugely essential to our spiritual life. To see the psychotherapeutic piece as not spiritual is to completely miss the point.
I agree with that. I guess I'm asking, because, I went into an intense 4-year school to really do work. I'm always challenging myself, but I'm talking about on a daily basis. What are how can one do that with, aside from all the therapeutic models out there daily, by not just witnessing, but really jumping in. Like, for an example, my mother. I've had a challenge with my mother since she was born. Most of us do, since I was born. And, to this day, I'm always asking myself, why is this still affecting me? What is it? Let me dive a little bit deeper every time I'm around her, and let me witness it, but also, look what's coming up in my body. Look what's coming up in my emotion.
Well, there you go. You're doing it. I mean, you just keep working the piece. I think it's good to find the modalities that work for you. Like, for example, I like bioenergetics, so I have a foam cube in my house. So if I need to do anger work, I can take a picture of someone that I'm angry at, or simply hold that thought in my mind, and I can smash that cube hard and move that anger. So you create something in your home environment. Then that's a body-centered approach, but something in your home environment that actually means you don't have to go to somebody's house to pay them $150. You can actually do it at home. And so find the modality that works for you and keep working with it, and really understand this idea of, people talk about, they call therapists, they go, how long is this going to take? Well, you really need to understand it's going to take your whole lifetime.
Your whole lifetime, right.
That's it. You and if you don't have, you have the Western consciousness, which is substitute grads, do it quickly, let's get this over with, on to the next gratification. You're not going to get anywhere on the path.
I agree. Well, I feel like the path is life. So it just, that's...
Here we are. We're here to grow and expand. I mean, I'm convinced if we work it all out, to take us away. So the fact that we're here still means we probably have something to figure out.
Absolutely. So in your book, you spoke about peak experiences, and you talked about how they crack us open. And I've spoken with Elizabeth Lesser on that with her book, Broken Open. And they give us a glimpse of you would talk about the issues and challenges that keep us living these full lives so we can work on them. And I wanted to ask you, you've been speaking a lot about your father and that experience of his death on Facebook. And I wanted to ask you where you are right now with that, and any experiences you wanted to share.
That's been, that's a crack open, or what Eckhart would call an aha moment, or something like that. And, that needs to be integrated. I mean, I don't think there's any, in my now real experience, anything that prepares you for the death of a parent, even when you're somewhat estranged from it. I mean, it's an internally chaotic, profound experience, and mostly for me, not a seamless experience, but mostly a positive interface with the spirit of my father, the memory of him. And I think there was a way in which my primal child self never felt completely safe in the world, because at an early age it was scary. And something about him leaving his body has actually paved the way for me to actually feel like I'm relating again to the inner narrative that had developed between us before he became scary in my early life. And so that's where I am. I'm trying to, in the middle of a busy life, trying to stay connected to and to deepen and clarify what the real relationship between our spirits is, because it was blocked by all that human madness in between.
and you wrote about that. And I've read a lot of your stuff lately, so I don't remember where it was, but maybe it was on Facebook. But it touched my heart what you wrote about the soul to soul and being able to connect with him more deeply now than you ever have.
Yeah, well, than I have in many years, for sure.
Many years.
I think probably at the very beginning I felt him in a very primal way, and then the madness of the parents took over, and so I don't feel as though I've had a real felt relationship with him, or even been able to hear his languaging, his supportive languaging internally because of all of the crazy. My father was a deeply loving, poetic man who had great possibilities and who just couldn't get there. It was all he could do to work through his stuff and manage the stuff in his life, and he came from horrible beginnings. And but at the same time, there's a deep resonance from his essential self that I felt early in my life and then lost connection to, and I feel now like it's much closer to me than it's been in a long time. And so it's developing a relationship with this feeling that actually I parented, ironically, now that my parent is dead.
Right.
It's so interesting and entirely unexpected.
Oh, that's very interesting. It's beautiful. And I really connected with it when you spoke about it, and you wrote about it, just because of the deaths that I've experienced in my life, including my father, who sexually abused me. And so there was this place of still trying to heal that from being a teenager and really looking at that. So it touched me and moved me to try to think about and feel into connecting with anyone and any soul, and looking at the contract and the relationship that you have and healing that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it's, this is now for the rest of my life part of my internal interplay to try to come back. I mean, it's really complicated when there's abuse. It was complicated for me when there was abuse. Let me reframe. But something about him leaving his body. So, I read these crazy hate letters he used to write, and I read them, and I'm hysterical. I find them so funny now because he's not here, and I'm not afraid of him on a primal level, but also because there's something about it just seems like some misguided human effort to express our fucked upness, and with him having left his body, I feel like all I feel is what his essential loving intention was. All the rest of it just seems kind of silly to me now. Sexual abuse is a totally different story, but at the same time, these letters had really, really prevented me from connecting with him, and they were really projected letters he was really wanting to write to my mother, but he didn't have her address, so I got sent the letters. He put Dear Jeffrey instead of Dear Barbara, but now, and they're nasty and they're crazy insulting. I just think they're ridiculously funny now, and I'm just back to, oh, Albert, you're so funny. And,
so it just really left you, yeah. I mean, something left, released from you.
Just left. It's just whatever.
That's awesome. So now I want to switch to something. I love all of your different terms, but you called it growthful chaos. And I read about it, and then what came up for me is the vision of our community is very interesting. I have Women for One has a following that is 60% ages 18 to 24 in the Middle East, and women. And then we have 40%, 40 to 55-year-olds in Australia, Europe, and the US. So it's a very unique demographic that we have. And there's such chaos going on outwardly in the Middle East. Yet the women that I've connected with, which I'm planning on going over there and connecting with them further at Cairo University, are these young, powerful women in the middle of an outward-looking, somewhat chaos life. But they are so grounded and powerful and educated. And I just wanted to ask you to kind of speak to your term and then kind of giving you info about who we are as well when you speak to it.
Just the whole idea of growthful chaos?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, God, it's like I'm a Virgo, and nothing made my life more difficult than being a Virgo. And one who grew up in chaos, so really longed for some form of artificial order around me in order to feel like the world made sense to me. And that tendency actually has held me back on my path. I had to let that go because in order for me to shift my ways of being or my archetypal lineage, let's say, or the way I move through the world, I had to surrender to confusion. And I had to let things get messy and what I call chaotic magnificence, ultimately, but not originally. Originally, it was just ugly and confusing and what I call nervous breakthroughs that felt like nervous breakdowns as parts of me dissipated and melted and other parts began to take form. And to me, if you can't allow yourself to plummet into the chaos of the self-creation process, you won't make any progress on the path. If you're obsessed with external order, the look of order, the feeling of cleanliness in all kinds of areas of your life, you have a problem on the path because expansion doesn't happen that way. Even now in my world, I run a business, I have a grounded practical business, I'm book writing, I'm managing a whole social media interactive world. And, you know, I can't, the last thing that's on my mind is cleaning the living room. And so if all I cared about, if I won't let go of my idea of cleaning the living room, I'm not going to be able to write books. So I have to choose. Am I going to write books and plummet into the chaos, the beautiful, enhancing, but challenging chaos of the creative process, or am I going to make sure that the house and the car are cleaned out? And, you know, the simple truth is that I can't do it all. So I have to allow myself to live in chaos in order to give birth to a truer order in my life. And it's so funny, the other day that I have a place in Toronto for the summer, and there's a guru, Jagadish, I let them stay there for the week. He was coming to do some teachings, and I met him the first night. I rode up on my bike, and he was on the porch, and he points to a car that's on the street, you know, because I was bike riding in Toronto, and he goes, look at that car, and there was papers all over the front dash, and he said, I think a homeless man lives in that car. And he's from the U.S., right? And I said, no, it's not a homeless man, Jagadish, it's my car, and my office is on the dash. So,
Great.
So that's the price you pay to give birth to a higher order in your life sometimes. And so that's just one metaphor example of it, but you have to let go of that.
Well, and it's great you're talking about that because my husband, I shared a couple of posts that you've spoken with. He doesn't have a Facebook account, but his son is very obsessed with external, you know, organization. And so you wrote about that about a month or two ago. And I emailed it to my husband, and he emailed it to his, we have 4 teenage sons, all the boys, because, you know, it's nice to hear it from that, what did you call it, a benevolent warrior archetype more, where you hear it from a male perspective. And he smiled and resonated with it. I don't think he's ready to let go of the order yet, but just hearing that it really is keeping the outside orderly is because, you know, you're trying to control your internal chaos.
Yeah, that piece had a lot of resonance, and it was so funny, that piece, because I posted it, and then I would notice a bunch of people would post it on other people's walls and go, you know, I think you can relate to this one, right? So all of their OCD, crazy, clean up the house freaks were sent that particular thing, saying, I want to look at what and where it happened for me, this was so funny, is I had a customer, my window business, who was obsessed. I went in the house, and I knew he was came from the same Jewish energy history that I did, like the crazy family madness, everything neurotic, all that. And I knew from interacting with him, he was like my uncle, and all he was doing through this interaction to order this product was to keep straight. Is the picture straight enough? Do you think it's quite, maybe move a little to the left? And I thought, oh God, you must be really messy inside if you think that, if you got to get it so perfect on the outside to feel like there's balance and order in the universe.
It's so true. I tease my friend. He comes in my house, and if my things are hanging crooked, he walks around and fixes them, and then I walk behind him and make them uncrooked again. I'm like, look, this is who I am.
To do that, no, it's so amazing. If they were really willing to play the game with you, you'd say, look, I'm going to go into your house, and we're going to turn everything upside down, and I want you to sit and feel into what that brings up in you. And I guarantee if they stayed there long enough, they'd go back to the old childhood issues that they're trying to get away from.
That's right. That's so true. I learned all about that 10 years ago because I was just like that, and I'm still working it.
So, me too.
Yeah. So one thing I did want to ask you in wrapping up, 2 more questions. Your inner voice has been so strong. You know, you called it the cellular phone. I love that. And I've had that as well. And I've noticed that over the years, the more energy I give it, the louder it becomes, the more I surrender to it. Yet in Women for One, that's what we're talking to women about. It's about, releasing those stories, sharing them, sharing your wisdom, and also listening, really listening to those quiet whispers and following them, taking action around them. It's wonderful to listen, but if you don't take any kind of action or work it, like you've talked about, there's no benefit to that. I mean, if you ignore it, you push it down, it comes back up. So how did you develop that? And can you talk to that for a few minutes?
Well, I had, I called the little voice that knows, and I named my little Missy.
Little Missy, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And, it's good to name it, actually, because I know Jung had a name for his. I can't remember, then Plato had a name for his, too. It's good to have names for these parts of us. That gives them somehow more power. And, mine was just really loud. I mean, she kept me up at night, and she whispered, what I ultimately say is she whispered sweet somethings in my inner ear, but she really, really annoyed me for years because I was just ready to be a prominent trial lawyer.
Right.
And, I didn't want to hear a voice say that's not your path, and I'm not going to tell you what your path is, but just trust me, that's not your path. And so you have to just sit in the not knowing and feel really fucked up for a long time before you find your path. Are we allowed to swear on this show?
Oh, anyway, absolutely. Yeah.
So, I should have asked that at the beginning.
No.
But, so, eventually what happens is you decide, to me that's the voice of true path, or that's the voice of your soul scriptures, or that's the voice that knows where you belong and where you don't belong, just to make it really simple. And you want to strengthen your relationship with that voice. Solitude is one of the terms I use to create some time alone with your soul self. So you schedule time during your week. You find a place in nature or in dance or in music or in your car, driving or whatever it is, where you can be alone with some part of you. Cultivate a relationship with your inner knowing and trust that there is an inner knowing, even if you can't hear it at first. And, it depends really where you're beginning the journey from. I had enough awareness to understand what was happening. But for some people, intuition is they've been so pushed down and so shamed in their voice, and so told that they don't know anything and that the scripture that they read and the book they study is the answer. And that's a problem because they really don't have a relationship with that voice. So they have to start softly and slowly give it a little bit more breath. And eventually it'll become a prominent part of their inner dialogue.
And okay, that's wonderful. And you started doing this though, and then in reading your book, when a little voice is annoying you, a lot of time you don't take action around it. So what would you say is it inside of you that really just started respecting that and following it?
I'm such a grower. Like I have such a deep, profound, liberated longing to grow and expand, and I've had that from the beginning. I should never have gotten out of that family. Right? I certainly should never have made it to law school. So there was there's a push, what Maslow called the actualizing tendency, and for many of us, it's pushed down. And mine, for whatever reason, was I was a force of nature, energetically. You couldn't stop me if you tried, and they tried. My mother tried to destroy me. My environment was certainly not supportive, and I really, I guess, made some decision at an early age that I was going to try to push my way through it and find my true path. And I was obsessed with it. I would write on the walls my goals for the week. I would write on my hands the goals for the day, so I wouldn't miss any key piece that I had to accomplish. I am and was a deeply driven individual, and so I don't know what to do to activate that force in someone who's just like lying on the couch immobilized. That's someone who has to begin the stages just simply working therapeutically to find their life force. But
right, so you've just always been deeply connected to your life force and driven.
Well, I've just had a lot of it, of course, and my challenge has been to manage it. Because I could do bad with this life force.
Yes,
I really get that. I could become a very successful criminal with this life force, and so it's about mobilizing it. And so sacred purpose helps me because I believe this belief that I have deeply that I came in and that everyone comes in with purpose, however humble it may be, something to learn or grow or expand into. To keep coming back to that and aligning that with all that life force, to me, is the way to do it.
Right. And that comes to my last question, where I ask if you have a piece of wisdom to share with our community. And right there, just saying that about every person has a life's purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. And also to really work the emotional body piece. And don't listen to all this spiritual bypass nonsense out there about witnessing your pain body and then it goes away. And to me, that's just self-avoidance masquerading as enlightenment. And most of the people who are talking that talk have simply given up on working their material through. You have to align your emotional work with your spiritual work. You can't see them as divorced from each other. And to the extent that because working a key emotional issue, not only does it actually transform you in your spirituality and grow you into the being that's capable of handling more and going farther and deeper in a path of purpose, but it also creates space inside for the purpose to reveal itself. When you're all bunked up with stuff, and somebody says, what's your purpose in life? You can't even get there because you're so immobilized by this giant amount of material. So you work the material through to grow yourself, but also so that you can actually glimpse yourself.
That's awesome. And with that, it just came up for me, because I lived with a guru in India, and I came away from it with a really bad taste in my mouth of belief systems. And so it was so cool. That's the only word I can think of, to watch someone like you. And I watched the trailer to Carmageddon and watch, you're saying you have somebody staying in your house as a guru in the US, and I know the difference between the different kinds of gurus, and you spoke about that. To see someone that's so grounded and so interested in working the emotional body that still can hold that other space for the Eastern philosophy,
Sure. I love ungrounded spirituality. There's a part of me that wants to bypass this bullshit
yes.
all day, every day.
Yes.
I want to float around like a mystic. I want to sleep in my car in Maui and tell you I'm enlightenment. I want to sleep with as many gorgeous women as I can and claim myself an enlightened master. I have that part of me. I'm just like too Canadian and grounded to buy into it for more than 5 seconds at a time. So to me, it's my greatest. If I hadn't had those detachment moments, those aha moments, as Eckhart says,
right,
I would never have believed I was moving, that there was anything worth striving towards, like a better reality. But eventually, after having enough of them, it was like, okay, now what? I'm floating away from my body. The emptiness can't be the whole trip.
Right.
Being part of a unified field doesn't explain all these gifts and callings in me that want to be expressed. So why am I here? What's my individual droplet of meaning in the heart of this unified field? And to me, that's the question. You get that we're part of the oneness field, but then you come back down into your body and go, what's my place in the heart of it? And if you don't ask the second question, you got a problem.
Right.
You're just going to float away.
You're going to float away. Yeah. I find it
You're going to lose the house. You're going to lose the house, and you're going to lose your partner, and it's all going to fall apart. And asking the universe to fix it for you is not going to do it. You got to really do the work. So I really have always been a worker. I've worked like a dog. I put myself through school, so I've never stopped working. And if you unite, put it this way, the willingness to work hard with the quest for a more expanded spiritual field, you've got a shot.
You've got a shot.
Because you're willing to work for it.
That's great. And that's really what Women for One is about. It's not just about, let's all share our stories and feel sorry for ourselves, or even share our stories and release them. And yeah, it's action. It's work. It's working it.
Nike was not wrong when they said just do it.
Just do it.
At some point, it's like you can be a seeker all you want.
Right.
But often you end up just avoiding what you found. You seek with a really clarified intention, bring it back into your field, integrate it into who you are, and become that thing instead of just talking about it.
Yeah, and it made me think of one of my teachers when I joined this school after thinking I was a spiritual being about 10 years ago. And the first day she looked at me and she says, Kelly, you are one angry bitch. We're going to have to work really hard. You don't know anything. And it was the best thing I've ever been told. It's great to just do the work. It really is. It's worth it.
The real work, and just start with the self. This is the trick. Start with the self, not the spirit self,
right?
But the self, because it's all spirit.
It is.
This is spiritual. What are these people? What's that saying? That famous saying? We're spirit. We're human beings. We're spiritual beings having a human experience. And I say no. We're human beings having a spiritual experience, and they're absolutely the same thing.
Absolutely the same thing. That's great. Well, thank you so much for talking with me today. It's just so great. When I reached out to you, I was sitting on the plane. I was like, oh my gosh, did he just write that? I've got to interview him. And so I just wrote to you spontaneously. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Great to talk to you.